baby. 39 days. Jeff Probst is wearing a fedora. We've got some questionable cultural appropriation in the motifs. We've got some problematic vibes in the tribe selection. Welcome back to Survivor Analytics. It's time for Survivor 12, Panama/Exile Island. I'm not sure what the official name is. I'm the voice of the people. I'm psyched to be here. My name's Jack. With me, as always, the true expert. He knows where this season is going already. I do not. His name's Clyde. What's up, Clyde?
What's up, party people? We're back for our 9th season now.
That's
crazy that we've been doing this for 2.5 years at this point. In case you're new to the podcast, Jack already hit on this a bit, but the whole dynamic here is that Jack is your voice of the people. He's only seen the seasons that we cover on this podcast. I'm the true expert. I've seen every season in the history of the show. And I think we're in for a treat here. I'm really excited for Panama. I have some things written down on the history of Panama and the history of my personal watching of this season. But did you have any surface level thoughts on this first episode and kind of taking that time machine back to 2006 after watching 2 new era seasons back to back?
So, surface level thoughts. If you are just joining us, or if this is your first season of Survivor Analytics, or for some reason you're crazy and you're listening to our show in chronological order of seasons, we're watching this directly after Survivor 48. We watched the 48 finale 10 days ago. To go from the new era back to this, it's like injecting me with opium. I am filled with bliss and hope and new life. It's amazing. I open it up on Paramount Plus. There's a thumbnail of an episode where somebody shoots a slingshot. There's an episode that's titled Medical Emergency. I touched on this already, but Jeff is wearing a fedora.
It's not a fedora. It's a cowboy hat.
But it's like a cowboy hat from Australia. There's a difference. Tell us about your history with this season. When did you first watch this one?
So I first watched this season back in 2021. I was going through a binge of the show, and at this point, I was jumping all over Survivor history. When I first watched this, I was a bit lower on the season, and that's because I watched Survivor Panama after many of the seasons from Survivor's 30s, and those are some more strategically complex seasons. There's shifting alliance dynamics, there's a ton of idols and advantages, and that's just the kind of Survivor that I had grown accustomed to. And when you go back to Panama, there aren't that many twists here. The one big twist for the season is Exile Island, which I'm sure we'll jump into later on. But outside that, it's kind of your standard Survivor. But over time, I've really grown to love Panama. I think this is one of the best new player casts in the entire history of the show. And even in the first episode, we get some absolutely incredible character moments. We have a very serious moment with Tina talking about her son. We have some crazy and wild moments between Courtney and the turtle, Shane and his cigarettes, Aris doing random meditation things with the young guys. This is a cast that has a lot of personality, and I think that makes up for the fact that there isn't a huge strategic focus, at least in the premiere.
Yeah. There's a lot going on here. It's the best of Survivor in that these are people who are here to play, but they are not game bots. These are not super fans. I don't get the sense that these are people who would be excited just to be offered the chance at Survivor pizza, right? They'll be excited to eat pizza because they're starving, but the fanboy level is lower because it's an earlier season, which I'm grateful for.
The biggest fan on the cast is probably Suri, who says in Tribal Council that she got up off the couch to compete. And even then, she recommends that future people don't get up off the couch to play the show. Yeah. So even the fans aren't fully bought in by the end of this one.
Just really quick, what Jeff's hat is this season is, in fact, an Australian Outback hat. An Outback-style hat. It's kind of like a cowboy hat. But if you look at it, there's just a couple of differences in the way that it folds over the head. There's a little bit more shade. If you look it up, you'll see what I'm saying.
I think he wore the same hat in Survivor China.
I think he did too. I think you're right.
Maybe in Survivor Cook Islands as well. In this entire experimentation era, Jeff is rocking the different hats. Today, he's too commercialized. He only wears the Survivor merch.
Do you want to start going through the episode here? I mean,
Before hopping right
Yeah,
into the episode, I can kind of set the stage for where we
please.
are in Survivor history. In case you ever go on the show, Jack, they might have one
I
of
won't.
those quizzes where they ask you to order the Survivor seasons. So it's important that you know the backstory going into this one. Survivor Panama, Season 12, Exile Island. You can call it any of those if you want. It aired in February to May of 2006. We covered Survivor Cook Islands. That would come out in September of that same year. So this is leading
Okay.
up to Cook Islands. We're still in the experimentation era. In the previous season, Survivor Guatemala, we had the introduction of the first hidden immunity idol, which is played after the votes are cast and after the votes are read aloud. This is technically the second appearance of Exile Island. It had a brief moment in Survivor Palau, which is season 10, but this is the first season that's really themed all around that twist. There isn't a season before this that has such a twist heavy focus, which I think is pretty interesting. Last thing to mention here is that there was a little bit of backlash when Panama first came out. When it was airing, there was a big break. I think there was like a 2 to 3 week break in between episodes for March Madness. So that caused some fan backlash. There was also some controversy over the location because they had filmed in Panama in the past. So people were thinking, oh, is production getting lazy by using the same location more than once? Little did they know that, 10 to 15 years later, every season would happen in the same spot. So
Yeah, they didn't know how good they had it. Oh, geez. Well, I mean, something I will throw out that I feel like should be addressed off the bat, and I can talk more about it later. The aesthetic vibe. So, really quick, this season should be referred to as Survivor Exile Island because they've done Panama before. So, this is Exile Island, not Panama, right?
So there's no other season called Survivor Panama. They filmed in Panama, but they just didn't call the season that. They used other names.
So, this is Survivor Panama.
Or you can call it Survivor Exile Island or Survivor Season 12, whatever you want, Jack. It's a choose your own adventure.
So, regardless, the aesthetic vibe of the season is head based. What I mean by that is there are skulls everywhere and shrunken heads everywhere. And later in the episode, I'll talk a little bit about head shrinking and that practice because, spoiler alert, it was not a Panamanian tradition. It's South American, but they're not remotely, they're a little far off. We'll get into it later. But I want to call that out off the bat. We'll talk about it more later. The skull visuals are intense. Shall we?
Yeah, the episode opens with a description of the season's twist. Off the bat, they're talking about Exile Island. This will be a season-long twist. And essentially the way that it works is that one contestant per episode will be banished to Exile Island. But there's a silver lining. Jeff says that there's, quote, a mystery that could help one of our survivors win $1 million and the title of sole survivor. That silver lining is the immunity idol. I mentioned it earlier. This is the old version of the idol where it can be played after the votes are cast and after they're read aloud. In Survivor Cook Islands, it was found by Yule, which helped him go all the way to the final 3.
Love Yule.
I know we talked about Exile Island a bit in the past, but after watching Cook Islands, how has your perspective on this twist shifted? Are you still high on this twist, or is it one that you would like to see change?
I don't remember it happening every episode on Cook Islands.
I don't know about every episode, but it was consistent throughout the season because even in the post-merge, they were doing Exile Island, where the I2s would constantly send Candace over there for betraying them earlier.
Okay, now that rung a bell because I remembered Yule going, I remembered Penner going, and I could remember some blonde lady going.
Yep, that was her.
That was Candace over and over, and now I remember the betrayal. So I'm fine with it. I like it. I think it's interesting as a premise. We'll see how this season goes, right? If people do the same thing that, what was it, I2 was the name of that tribe?
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens again here, if there's some majority who keeps bullying someone and keeping them out of the dialogue. I'm here for that, to be honest. I'm fine with it. I am neutral, trending positive after one episode.
I'm high on Exile Island as a twist. I think it can be a very interesting game mechanic. It just doesn't partner well with this version of the idol because it's such an overpowered item like we saw on Cook Islands, to the point where I think you're almost strategically incentivized to want to go to exile in the early game to get that opportunity to acquire that thing as soon as possible. Which is weird because I feel like most of the cast looks at exile as a punishment rather than a benefit. Like, yeah, it stinks for a day as you're stranded out there, but I'd rather have 24 hours of discomfort with an idol in my pocket than not go at all.
Yeah, that's fair.
The only other complaint I would have with Exile is that it does split up the episode a bit, where even in this one, I wanted to see what's going on at each of the separate camps, and we lose some time there because we have to go over to Misty crawling around in the dirt.
I think that's a great place to segue into the tribes here because it's a 4-tribe season and they've arrived on the island. Bring in the boats. Welcome to Exile Island. Time to line everybody up. Are you ready for the tribes here?
I'm ready.
I'm not going to use their names because Jeff refuses to use their names.
They have names.
I know they have
flags
names.
at each of the tribes camps. They have tribal names. And on the Wikipedia page, they have names as well, but they're never used in the actual episode.
Yeah. Jeff refuses to use the tribe names, so I don't have to either. Because guess what? I never, ever remember them, ever. I couldn't tell you a tribe from 48, and we just watched it. I could tell you 2 tribes in the history of the show, and it's Aitu and Foa. The 4 tribes: young men, young women, older men, older women. There's inconsistencies here. I'm looking at the ages. This is driving me nuts.
I looked at the same thing. If you look at this cast, you have people like Melinda is a member of the older woman tribe at 32 years old. Meanwhile, you have Bobby, who's a member of the younger men's tribe, also at 32 years old. So it feels pretty arbitrary, and you're automatically putting these contestants into boxes, which has an impact on the rest of the season. I think when players are looking to vote each other out, similar to Cook Islands, they're going to be thinking, okay, we need to have a balance of the younger men, the younger women, the older men, the older women, even if this doesn't last that long.
Yeah.
You also have players like Courtney, who's on the younger woman's tribe at 31. So I guess that line for at least the women's side is between 31 and 32. Once you hit 32, you're officially classified as an old head.
Yeah. This does feel like, it feels a little sexist. You know, there's such a thing as I think after 35, a pregnancy counts as a geriatric pregnancy. Have you ever heard that?
Oh, I did not know that.
I think it's 35. So if a person becomes pregnant from 35 onwards, they're considered geriatric in their pregnancy. That's a different line than 31 and a half, which is apparently the line for the women here. But yeah, we get the tribes. Jeff goes, "What's up, young men, young women, old women?" And Suri says, "I thought I was young." And I'll say this, I'm shocked she's 35. She could be 25. She looks so young. Like, that's why I asked you for the ages here, because I'm not Googling anything for this season, so it's not spoiled for me. Suri looks great here, and Suri's coming back for Survivor 50, right?
Yeah, she is on that cast.
She looks great in her headshot for that. She doesn't seem to have aged a day in 20 years. Anyway, we get these tribes. Not our most shocking breakdown, but we get to see them. Bobby describes the 2 female tribes as the Golden Girls and the Spice Girls, which is pretty funny. Not very nice, but pretty funny.
I did want to ask, are you okay with these opening tribal divisions?
No.
Like, when Cook Islands attempted something like this, it was obviously terrible. I don't think this one is as bad. Like, I think there are some interesting dynamics that can play out with this.
I don't like a couple things. I don't like a 4-tribe game. That's too much for me. 3's perfect. Keep it at 3. 3 tribes of 5 is so much better than 4 tribes of 4. I know that math doesn't add up, but whatever. So I don't like that. I don't like that the line is drawn inconsistently, right? It feels like they cast the season and then had to do the split. Here's what I do like to find a positive. There is a trend, and I remember Sue a couple years ago on the New Era season.
47.
I knew that. Talking about how she could have been the oldest sole survivor in history, right? It would be pretty cool to see the older ladies make a run on this season. I feel like my mom's going to get mad at me for referring to this tribe as older ladies when she listens to this episode, because she's a little older than the oldest one on that tribe.
Well, it's not your fault that Jeff labeled them that way.
Yeah, if my mom is listening, take it out on Jeff. Don't be mad at me. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's some interesting dynamics here. I think there's some interesting characters. It feels less fraught than Cook Islands, like you said, but I feel like if the game goes how it already feels like it's going to go, the older women tribe is going to be eliminated very quickly. Because if the challenges are geared up towards a physicality, right? And the older women have lost their best survival expert, the one who was leading the charge on camp and making fire and gathering wood, just at a disadvantage because of the environmental aspects that have been set up for them. And if all of a sudden the next challenge is a strength-based one, and you have two tribes of men who are yoga instructors and former military pilots against sales representatives, fire dancers, and social workers, and you've lost the biggest physical threat on the women's side, I don't know. There's a world where this ends up being a merged tribe with 6 guys and 2 ladies.
I can see that.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see.
I think the twist has potential. Survivor has divided contestants by gender in the past. They do it in season 6, Survivor the Amazon, and season 9, Survivor Vanuatu. But they've never done it like this, where it's by gender and by age. And I don't hate the twist on its surface. I think if production really committed to this with their casting, it could be way more interesting. We've had a season in the past, season 33, Survivor Millennials versus Gen X, where it's pretty clear on that season who are the Gen Xers and who are the Millennials. And those contestants really lean into their archetypes. And there's a solid age gap between the two groups. And that's not really the case here. It feels like they got this group of people together, and then at the last second, they threw this twist on top of it. I also agree with what you said with the 4 tribes of 4. I think part of what makes Survivor so interesting is that you have different ways of playing the game. You can take on that leadership approach. You can try to hide in the background. It's really up to you based on what fits your skill set. And I think in a tribe of 4, there's no room to hide. It puts so much more emphasis on the physical side of the game as well, which we'll talk about later. But the fact that Tina goes home episode 1 is absolutely absurd from a strategic perspective.
Yeah.
So I think it has a major impact on that side of the game. And I just don't know if it was needed, since we're already doing the Exile Island twist. We already have a season-long theme for this one. We don't need to throw another thing on top of it. It's not the thing that I'll remember walking away from the season, that, oh, that was the one where they divided by gender and age.
Yeah, I think that's all very well said. Should we jump in?
Yeah, immediately with the reward challenge.
Yeah, here, I can run through it real quick after I sneeze.
I'm probably going to keep that in. I think sometimes I cut it out when you have a sneeze or a cough, but that one is such a distinct noise that I'm going to keep it in the pod. Maybe we can use it as like a transition audio snippet in the future.
Okay, let me sum up this reward challenge really quick. On Exile Island, a member of each tribe has to run down the island, smash a bunch of skulls. Once you find 3 amulets, you can race back. First 3 back win the reward of their flint. The last tribe has to exile somebody and go home with no fire. Quick rundown, we send the competitors are Terry, Austin, old man Terry, young man Austin, Ruth Marie from the older women, and Misty is not the competitor from the younger women.
It's Danielle.
Danielle is the competitor. It's a very simple challenge. There's not much commentary to provide. Terry wins first. Austin gets second. Comes down to the ladies and Ruth Marie, quote unquote, old woman.
Old geezer Ruth Marie.
But it's worth noting, she's the oldest woman on the island, and she does well. She's holding her own, right? I am very hopeful that this season of Survivor bucks the stereotype of the older woman as a liability competitively in the game. So far, so good, right? At this stage, we're good to go. So the young women have to exile somebody, and they go for rock, paper, scissors, ending on Misty. Now, Misty is a missile engineer. she is going to Exile Island or she's going to stay on Exile Island. My question for you, Clyde, is Misty short for missile?
You think she's named after her profession? I think she had a different name, changed it to Missile, and then did Misty for short. But I don't think she mentioned being a missile engineer once the entire episode. Hopefully we get to see her and Dan meet up. We get the astronaut and the missile engineer talking shop on the beach. With that first challenge, though, I will say that I'm so used to hearing Jeff's sweet voice commentating the challenge, and that was not the case for this one, because all of the contestants run to the opposite side of the island, so no one can see them. Jeff can't commentate, and they don't know who wins until they actually get back. So it was a stranger opening than we've seen on most other seasons.
I'm here for it. I like the tension of no one knows what's going on, and when it comes down to the two women, Jeff hears somebody running back and says, "Here comes somebody." I like that tension. I like that something is left unsaid. There's something implied. There's a tension in the waiting. It's just different and better, right? It's not hyper explained. Let me pace up and down the little special track that the Fijian government has sanded down for me in the jungle so that I can walk up and down the same challenge course I have for 10 years, right? So Misty is going to Exile Island, and Jeff explains the immunity idol. What I really appreciate is that he explains the immunity idol like it's a new thing.
Because it is a new thing. It's just one season old at this point.
I missed this so much. Not like 1,000 advantages. There's not an idol in every camp. Simpler game. I'm here for it. I missed it. I love it. On Exile Island, you are provided with two things: a machete and a bucket of unboiled water, which, as Jeff says, won't do you much good because you need to boil it, but you have no fire. Jeff says that he has already given Misty the clue to the idol. What seems to be the clue is, why did fate leave you behind? Do you want to leave Misty, or do you want to cover Misty now and her hunt?
I think I'm good to leave Misty. I feel like there isn't much to say. She searches around the island for a bit, and she doesn't find anything.
No.
She's going to pretend like she found something, but we can hit on that more at the immunity challenge.
Great.
So we have 4 tribes to cover here. I'm down to just table the older woman for post-challenge, and we can cover everything going on with them after they lose immunity.
Well, the one thing I will say before immunity is that at the older women's camp, they do a full Christian prayer. It is 2000 Survivor perfectly. I mean, this is the era of freedom fries and prayer before a challenge. Like, we are back. Oh, my goodness. But do you want to go to the younger men?
Yeah, we can start with the younger guys. And these are your stereotypical jocks. They're shirtless. They're playing baseball on the beach. It looks like an old Abercrombie and Fitch commercial. Austin is receiving that classic old school Survivor blur over his ass cheeks. It's a fun time over on the guys' tribe. But my favorite thing that we see over at this group is Aris. Because Aris is a man of meditation. He's a spiritual guy. He would have fit very well on the older women's tribe where they did the group prayer. But he grabs Nick and Austin and he says, for us to build a fire, we first need to be in the right mindset. Who does he leave out of this?
Bobby,
I guess, was not ready for this spiritual awakening that Aris was
I don't think
providing.
Bobby's around, or he would have been brought in for sure.
So those 3 guys stand in a little circle and they all put their hands out, equidistant from each other. And as they're doing this, Aris is looking around like, you guys feel that, right? It's that transfer of energy. We're about to build this fire together. And I don't think that Nick and Austin are buying into it at all.
Absolutely not. They're like, what is this guy on? He's crazy. I'm fine with it. I'm here for it. We got a quirky little guy. That's great.
But it's fun. This is our introduction to Aris. We don't get a backstory from him. We don't learn about his childhood in confessional. The only thing we know about Aris is that he wants to do these meditations together as a group. And I think it adds a lot to the show.
Absolutely. Do you want to go to the younger women? Well, yes, one thing happens at the Spice Girls. They find a dead sea turtle, and Courtney draws a heart around it. That's all I wrote down. That's all you need to know.
I thought this would be your favorite snippet of the entire episode. This segment of Survivor Panama made me realize that this podcast has ruined me. When I watched this 3-4 years ago, I thought this was a comedic moment. I thought it was so hilarious watching Courtney draw this heart around a dead turtle and the other women are kind of judging her on the tribe. It's a pretty fun time. But now, after years of animal shots, I see this segment and my mind immediately jumps to, what does the turtle represent? I'm buying into Courtney's philosophy because of you, Jack.
All right, well, I'll tell you what the turtle represents, and that is the hopes of any deep social bond between Courtney and anybody else on this island. Because Courtney's job is, I believe Courtney's a fire dancer. Reminded me a little bit of the woman on, I think, China. Was there a similar, like, kind of hippie-ish woman on China?
I can look back.
I feel like it was on an older season. I think it was China, where there was a woman who was just a little kooky, a little hippie vibe. And I was reminded of that. This was a funny little moment. It is really sad. I was kind of shocked they showed it. That seems like something you would censor and be like, you don't want to see a poor little dead sea turtle. Like, that's kind of sad.
She reminds me more of Flicka from Cook
Flicka!
Islands. Yeah. I was thinking from China. There was no one that quirky there, but Flicka has a similar energy as Courtney.
Yep, that's all I've got at the younger women. Do you want to talk about the old men?
Yeah, the old guys.
Good stuff here. Good stuff here.
This is the tribe that's on it from the get-go. They're building the shelter. They're constructing camp. They're making fire. They're a cohesive unit. And there's two big things that happen over with the old heads. First is that we get our first alliance of the season between Dan and Terry.
Yeah.
Dan reveals that he's a former NASA astronaut, and he's really excited to share this information. Most of the time when players have a secret job title, they wait to warm up to people and reveal it to their closest ally to establish that bond, or they bring it up in the final tribal council. Dan isn't like that. He kind of operates based on vibes, and the second Terry passed that vibe check, Dan was willing to tell him off the bat. And Terry reciprocates. He tells him that he was a former military pilot. I like this duo. I think they could make an impact on the game, but I just think it's really funny how quickly Dan is willing to give up that information.
Yeah, I love this duo. Traditionally, and I think it might be different by the time you get to the space shuttle era, but in the older eras of space flight, of astronauthood, you would be a fighter pilot on top of everything else, right? Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were both, I believe, had a scientific background, but were also fighter pilots, right? Buzz Aldrin flew planes in World War II and then flew a space shuttle, I think. Don't quote me on that. The expectation was you are a pilot and a scientist, right? So the fact that we have a NASA guy and a pilot, there's going to be a lot of good vibes here. I feel good about this. And then the other thing to note from the old men is Shane. And Shane is everybody's favorite kind of shit show because Shane has been smoking for how long?
He's been smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 years.
20 years. 20 years of 3 packs a day. And he's gone cold turkey immediately before coming out to the island. This is so much. Who was it? The therapist who hadn't, I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Hannah Rose on 45. Shane walked so Hannah Rose could run. And isn't that ironic? Shane starts off with the cigarettes back in Panama. Fast forward 20 years and you have Hannah missing her vape on Survivor 45. It all comes back to it.
And I'm not any sort of smoker or anything like that. I wonder what the difference is in these withdrawal systems. Symptoms, right? 3 packs a day is a constant ingestion of nicotine. But if you have a vape, yeah, it can also be a constant, right? All day, every day. I had a professor in college who would keep multiple vapes on his desk and pretend he wasn't vaping in his office when you would walk in. It can be just a steady feed. So this guy's been smoking way longer, might be smoking a higher amount of nicotine at a time instead of the lighter, because typically that's the thing with vape is, it's lighter, it's less intrusive or whatever. This is so dumb. Imagine going on Survivor after 20 years of 3 packs. It's so dumb. And maybe that's why he did it. maybe this is how he thought he would quit smoking. But I don't think so from the way he's talking about it.
It's so dumb, but it makes me appreciate Shane even more. It's such an irresponsible decision. Hannah was flamed in 45 when she did this. Like, granted, that was partially due to the fact that she quit in the premiere. So Shane has already beat her in that instance.
True.
I went online and took a look at some common nicotine withdrawal symptoms.
Thank you.
So this is what Shane has to look forward to in the next couple days. Cravings, anger, depression, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and increased appetite. Symptoms generally peak in intensity on the 3rd to 4th day of nicotine withdrawal. So we'll probably see that in the next episode as they're headed into days 4 through 6. And those symptoms last 3 to 4 weeks before they start to fade. So his entire time, if he were to make it all the way to the end, would be with all of these symptoms going on at the same time.
And so just to highlight again, this guy hopes to be spending 39 days on the island, suffering from anxiety, sleeplessness, increased appetite, and irritability in a game where there's no food, you're sleeping on bamboo at best, and you have to be friendly and sociable with others. And you have to keep a level head to play strategically and not get voted out. Every single facet of Survivor is the exact antithesis of nicotine withdrawal.
It's amazing. And he's already starting to crack a little bit. There's a moment in this episode where Bruce is asking some of the guys for advice, and Shane pokes at him a bit, and he says, we don't need to work as a group for every decision that we make around camp. We can split up a little bit. This is day 1, and he's already getting a bit angry with these other players. So imagine how he's going to feel on day 5, day 10, day 15, and so on. So I'm excited to see what we get from Shane.
I really hope he doesn't get eliminated and he is trapped on this island. I want him to go through 38 days. I want him to sit at Final Tribal and just be like, please kill me. Jeff, I'll give you a gun with 1 bullet. Take me out. This could be a Werner Herzog documentary, right? I want to chronicle the decline of this guy because it's such a boneheaded move.
Last thing I'll say with Shane is that there might be some hope from him. This is the era of Survivor where they would have sponsored rewards. So if they include some kind of cigarette sponsor reward, that's right up Shane's alley.
Oh, you win a challenge and you get to go to the Lucky Strike Island and smoke a pack?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get a flint. That would be so funny if you get to go to the cigarette island, but they don't have a flint.
The cigarette sanctuary where good things happen?
My dad once told me he used to work with a guy who had promised his wife he'd quit smoking, and so he would just chew on cigarettes. And so maybe you just do that if you don't have fire. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
I'm good for the immunity challenge then.
All right. So the actual challenge is, frankly, kind of a new era challenge. We have a bunch of stages, but it's half offshore, half onshore. Jump off a scaffolding, get on a raft, dive down, unhook the raft, paddle to shore, or you have a choice. Either try to solve a rope puzzle or spend some time digging up a manual or an instruction thing on how to solve the rope puzzle, right? Do it yourself or find a solution and execute on the solution, but sacrifice time. First people to undo the rope puzzle, throw a ring over a hook and pull it and drop a flag, win. Last tribe standing goes to tribal council. That's a quick little breakdown. But as everybody comes in, Misty returns from Exile Island. Can you break down for me the incredible move Misty has decided to pull right off the bat?
So Jeff asked Misty, how was your experience on Exile Island? And she's a bit coy with it. She claims that Exile Island has its advantages, and she spent just enough time searching for the idol. So she's planting these seeds that she's the one with the idol, she's the one in the power seat. And based off what we saw on Survivor Cook Islands, if you have that overpowered idol, people don't want to target you, because then you essentially have full say over who goes home in that tribal council. So I like this idea from Misty. It feels pretty advanced from a strategic perspective, given the era of the show that we're in. Because maybe the future people that go to Exile Island, they won't even bother searching for the idol because they'll just assume that Misty already has it. So I think she's coming forward as one of the stronger players on the cast.
Yeah, it's a really strong move. It's really bold off the bat. We don't get to see anything from the younger woman after the challenge to see how this pans out, right? What's going on back at camp that night? What are the conversations happening? Hopefully we'll see that next week. But run through the challenge really quick. The immunity idol for the tribal stage of this season is a spear with several shrunken heads impaled upon it. The winning tribe, the first tribe to win, will get the spear itself. 2 of the heads will be the immunity idols for the second and third place tribes. Just wanted to note that that's the context we're dealing with here as I gear up to give you my shrunken head spiel here in a bit. Really quick, the young guys are far behind for most of the challenge. It takes them forever to unhook their raft. The older men and younger women are the strongest competitors here for most of the challenge. Somehow 2 of the younger men start bleeding. The older ladies decide they're going to dig up the instructions or the diagram. They do so successfully, but they get so hypnotized by the instructions, by the diagram, that they never pick up the rope puzzle. They don't seem to demonstrate much urgency. The younger women win first, then the older men. It comes down to the younger men or the older ladies. And while the younger men are trying to figure it out and doing all this stuff, moving the rope every which way, the older women are just kind of clustered around looking at the instructions. It feels kind of bewildering, like they just got shell-shocked and were like, well, let's just stand here. Yeah, it's weird.
It's the flip of what you would expect for this kind of challenge, where going in, I thought that the guys would dominate the water portion of the challenge, actually getting that boat to shore, and then they could struggle on the puzzle piece. But it's the opposite, where they're the last group to make it to the beach, but they get the puzzle faster than the older woman. So I'd say that this was a pretty balanced challenge overall. You don't want to do one that's too physical or too puzzle oriented, given the way that you've divided up these tribes. And I think this was a pretty good result. Like going in, I would expect the 2 younger crowds to place first and second and the 2 older crowds to place towards the end, but it didn't end up that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the interesting challenge when you do tribes like this. How do you scale, or do you scale things? We see like the endurance challenge with the twisted rope in the bucket in the new era, where you scale the physical challenge by making it personal. Every person's bucket is 25% of their pre-show body weight. That's a well-scaled challenge. When you do a tribal one like this, you can't really do that. You have to find other ways to balance it. And I think they did a good job here. I agree with you. The older women will be going to tribal, and we go back to camp with the older ladies. I felt really bad about this. Tina has gone off and sat by herself. And we start to get this montage of her sort of wandering around. There's some strange music. And I feel terrible because I wrote down weird little montage.
The tone of the show completely shifts at that point.
Yeah.
There's slow motion shots of Tina looking out into the distance. It's filmed a bit. Oh, what was the name of it? What's the name of that movie of the woman who loses her arm to the shark attack?
Soul Surfer.
It had some Soul Surfer vibes to it.
Deep cut. I mean, also from this era, I think, as memory serves. Yeah, it's a weird tone. And right about the time I was writing down, hey, this is a weird tone, we find out that she's very emotional because her son died in a car accident 4 months ago. Her high school age son was killed in a car wreck, and she's mourning it. She's writing a little message to him in the sand. She has decided to keep it to herself. This is, I mean, devastating. And I gotta be honest, I don't like how the show handled it because we go so quickly from this moment, and part of it is it's what happened in the episode. But we go very fast from this emotional moment of Tina grieving her son to her being the target, and we get this montage of her being loud because she's a very exuberant person around everybody else. That's a tricky, how do you handle that delicately, right?
From the editing team's perspective, you need to show that scene with Tina because that's so integral to her story on the show at large. I bet part of the reason why she gets voted out here is because she needs to take that time away from camp to kind of mentally prepare herself for the game and also pay homage to her son. So it's a
Yeah.
part of the story of the episode that you need to include, but it's also really difficult because Tina gets voted out. So you want to show it in a positive light, but you also need to be honest in terms of the direction of the vote.
Right. It's tough. They do okay, right? I mean, it's not spaced out like with Joe and, his grieving his sister and then being voted out on 48, or not voted out, but not voted for. Anyway, so we have this emotional moment with Tina, and then we get into the tactical stage of the post-tribal. Two narratives here. Cirie wants to take out Tina, sees her as a threat. She's too big of a physical provider. She's the one taking the lead around camp, not doing all the work. That becomes a sticking point at tribal, and we'll come back to that. But she's a big presence, and Cirie says, we got to go for her. Melinda, on the other hand, wants to go for Cirie because Cirie's not doing enough around camp. Now's the point in the episode where Jack has to make a disclosure. I don't know who wins this season. At the end of this episode, I need to pick a winner for this season, somebody I think will win. I do not know if Cirie has ever won a season of Survivor. What I do know is that she's about to come back for her 6th time, right? Or is 50 or 5th?
5th.
So she's been on the show at least, or she will have been on the show 5 times. There's no way you're on the show 5 times without winning at least once. That's my thinking. I'm weighing if it's ethical for me, if it's fair for me to pick Cirie as my winner. When I'm watching this episode, I don't know any other names. I know her from people talking, from friends of the show, Abby and Alexis talking about her. I see all of this, and I am trying to avoid the bias of, Cirie's going to win this game. Any strategy she has is going to pan out, right? I'm trying not to have that lens because I don't know if it's true or not, but I am inclined to think it.
I think that's really fair, especially in this first episode. If you know that Cirie is on Survivor 50, then you also know she's most likely not voted out in the premiere of her first season. So going into Tribal, you probably expected Tina to go home just based on your knowledge of Survivor history. In terms of your winner pick, I have no issue if you want to take Cirie. Back in Cook Islands, you took Parvati after the first episode because that was a name that you recognized. So
That's
just
true.
because a name is famous in the Survivor community doesn't automatically mean that person is a winner. So I'll allow it if you want to go down that path. I don't think it's fair for me to say out of the 16 contestants, you're not allowed to select the people who you've heard about before. I will say when it comes to Cirie in this vote, this is a player that just understands the social game of Survivor so well because by old school Survivor standards, every arrow is pointing directly at Cirie. She's afraid of bugs. She doesn't want to pick up the leaves because she's worried about the bugs that might be underneath. She doesn't help a lot in terms of camp life either. Meanwhile, Tina is the one that's making the fire, catching the first fish, serving as your strongest physical competitor. I think if you run this simulation, or if you look at the history of Survivor in general, more often than not, the person in the Cirie archetype is the one that goes home over the contestant in the Tina archetype. And had the tribes on this season worked out differently and it wasn't this 4 tribal split, then I'm pretty sure Tina survives at least the premiere. It's just the construction of everything around her.
Let's go to tribal. We get to the site of the tribal camp or tribal councils. It is a spooky cave situation with a ton of fires around, campfires and candles and stuff. I wrote down here, damn, Jeff, good lighting. Remember when he was young? Jeff's looking way younger, good lighting. He does not look like the grandfather I assume he is now. Anyway, 2 narratives start to come out at camp. Really just one narrative, but 2 sides of it, which is Tina is the leader of this little tribe. Tina started the fire. Tina found the water. Tina's this outdoors woman, right? She's a lumberjill. She's got all this experience. That's really great. And I think Jeff sets her up a little bit here because Jeff asks if she's happy with the contributions from everybody else on the tribe. Up to this point, I was like, well, I don't think Surie's going home because I know she's famous, right? I know she's got a chance at a good run. You don't go out first in a season and come back. But I was like, something else could happen. Something could change. There could be some crazy tribal council where Surie has the greatest speech of all time, is still eliminated, and comes back anyway. There could be something like that. But instead, Jeff asks Tina this question, and she says, yep, everybody else could work harder. Nobody in the new era is going to say something like that because they've learned the lesson. But just in case, in some post-apocalyptic wasteland of the future, you're listening to this episode of Survivor Analytics on a wax cylinder that the archivists at our presidential library saved, and somebody has recreated the game of Survivor in real life, and you're at a tribal council, don't bring up that the people around you who are trying to survive with you could work harder. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it. And this is absolutely her downfall. If she wasn't already probably on the chopping block, this guaranteed it.
It's not the best move from Tina, but I'm happy that she did it. I'm so accustomed to these modern tribal councils where there's no real new information that comes out. Everyone is so prepared to answer Jeff's questions and provide these non-answers that the tribal council just fills up 10 minutes of the episode, and it's just Drew Basile giving different analogies the entire time. But in these old school seasons, it feels like the tribal councils actually mean something because the contestants have slip-ups like Tina. To be fair, I think she was probably on her way out the door regardless of what she said. But at the same time, it's not a great move from her. And I also don't understand why the title of leader is so bad at this stage of the game. I get it. You don't want to be the leader because if the tribe fails, then you take on more of that responsibility. But we're one episode in. This isn't a history of terrible leadership on Tina's end, and it seems like she's doing a good job at rallying this group together at camp. I think she just was up against a great social force in Surie, and that ended up being her downfall. Want to go to the final vote?
Yeah, let's knock out the vote here.
It's a 3-1, 3 votes on Tina, 1 on Surie. Tina is sent out of the door. Do you think Tina returns to the game of Survivor?
Oh.
Yeah, you're right. So Tina never comes back. I tried to see if she did a quarantine questionnaire back in 2020 because EW had a bunch of those at the time. She did not participate in that, so the only notes I have on Tina for post-Survivor come from her wiki page. She competed in the second season of the National Geographic's Ultimate Survival Alaska as a part of the Woodsman team. So she did that, and then in 2010, Tina attended Survivor's 10-year anniversary party. But outside that, it sounds like Tina has kind of fallen off the face of the earth, doing her own thing outside of Survivor, probably chopping down lots of trees in whatever state she was from.
Probably Alaska.
Was it Alaska? Let's see. She was from Maine, Trenton, Maine.
Dang it.
Hometown was Hayward, Wisconsin, though, which feels pretty on brand for her. Winners and losers?
Yeah, let's knock it out.
Well, do you want to do winners and losers first or your season winner prediction?
Well, I'm just going to stick with Surie. Surie is my winner pick until proven otherwise. I don't know if she's going to win. It might be like Parvati, where she has a really great run and earns a comeback. But to be honest, it's hard to see anyone else after episode 1 as a winner candidate, except maybe Misty. But I'm going to stick with Surie.
Because anyone outside of Surie and Misty that are shown in this premiere are presented more as characters than actual serious players in the game.
Yes, exactly. Well said.
So I wouldn't expect you to pick someone like Courtney or Shane or Aris after this first episode.
All right, but who's your winner pick?
Winner's going to be Surie.
Yeah.
I mentioned this earlier, but if you run this simulation on an old school season of Survivor, the person in Surie's spot goes home 90% of the time. So the fact that she was able to dig her way out of there in a 4-person tribe is really impressive. She essentially convinced Ruth, Marie, and Melinda that they don't need their strongest physical competitor in the challenges, and they don't need her in camp life either, which is crazy to me, but it's really great work on her end, so she gets my winner.
I think that's absolutely fair. My winner is Misty, the only other player with a really great episode. I like her bluff. This could carry her a long way. until somebody else gets to Exile Island and finds the idol. But for now, it's huge.
Who is your loser then?
My loser is Shane, cigarette guy.
Okay, Shane's also my loser.
He's screwed himself. It's going to be fun to watch. He's not going to win this game.
See, I debated giving the loser to someone else, but I feel like there wasn't anyone else on this episode that took a major hit like Shane. I also don't know if it's fair for me to give Shane the loser because his poor decisions came before the filming of the season. This isn't a loser moment from the particular episode. It's just him not preparing for the show itself. But given that no one really messed up their spot in this week, it just has to go to Shane by default.
Yeah. I think if your criteria is the loser is in the worst spot going into next week, he is definitely the one we have seen in the worst spot going into next week. Do you have an honorable mention?
I don't have a dishonorable yet, so you can give your honorable and I'll come up with mine as you go.
Okay, my honorable mention goes to the Hivaroan peoples of Ecuador and Peru. So let's talk about shrunken heads. Right? You see them in a lot of old movies. You see them in like an Indiana Jones, or there's the one on the bus in the Harry Potter movie, or Beetlejuice has a shrunken head. There's a lot of them in pop culture. We see a lot of them in this episode. The shrunken heads come from one place. The Shuar people, who are a tribe within the Hivaroan peoples of Ecuador and Peru, are the only culture in the world that practiced ritual head shrinking, right? This was a ritual of preparing the head of a slain enemy and turning it into a totem to protect yourself and to essentially use the soul of your enemy as a protective item, right? There's a very long process that's pretty gnarly of how they would actually shrink the head, how they would basically skin it and boil it to shrink it. But here's what's worth noting. The Hivaroan peoples are from Peru and Ecuador. And I know what you're thinking. Jack, you didn't say Panama. That's right. All of Colombia is between Peru and Ecuador on land. Where Panama comes into the shrunken head dynamic is in the fake shrunken heads. Because basically, pretty quick after the globalization and colonization, the Shuar started trading, this tribe within the Hivaroan peoples, started trading shrunken heads for guns. 1 gun per head.
Right? What?
1 gun per head or a pound of Peruvian gold, which was equivalent to a British gold sovereign. By 1919, a shrunken head in a Panamanian curio shop had risen to 5 pounds of British gold. Okay, I just mentioned Panama. People in Panama started making fake shrunken heads to sell to dumb white people, right?
Oh.
So the cultural significance comes from Ecuador and Peru. The economic significance comes from Panama. Basically, people in Colombia and Panama started making counterfeit shrunken heads. The other name for shrunken heads, by the way, is sansas. That's the traditional name. They would use corpses from morgues. They'd go just take their skin off of a dead guy in a morgue. They would use the heads of monkeys or sloths or goat skin. It has been estimated that 80% of sansas in private and museum collections are fraudulent, including almost all female or torso including heads, right? The traditional sansa was the head of a slain enemy, male warrior, shrunken down. So a female shrunken head, a shrunken head with shoulders, fake. All of that to say, in the last 20 years, a lot of national museums have started repatriating theirs, sending them back to Ecuador, back to these tribes. Oxford removed their collection in 2020. Mercer University did the same in 2019. The National Museum of the American Indian here in D.C. sent theirs back in 1999, right? So this is not a new thing. This has been going on since before Survivor Panama.
Wow.
But that's my spiel.
So those were the same shrunken heads that they were smashing in the first challenge?
No, because they weren't smashing shrunken heads in the challenge. Those were skulls. Those were just random skulls that they got at a morgue or something. Those, I assume, were real human remains. But I think it's really interesting that the only place Panama comes into play is in making fake ones, right? So there's a world where Survivor did this as a commentary on performative tribalism, on saying, oh, look, like Survivor 48, they had a made-up tribe, a made-up civilization, right? Maybe this shrunken head aesthetic is a commentary on the falsification of historical significance for consumerism. Somebody on Survivor set design in 2006 thought it would look cool and didn't really think about the ramifications.
There you go. There's the answer to your question. It was a random production intern that came up with the shrunken heads idea. They didn't even bother to look up to see the, country of origin.
Probably not. That's my honorable mention. So
that's a really good one. I appreciated the history lesson. I'll give my dishonorable mention to something that I've done dishonorable mentions for in the past, and that's the animal shots. Leading up to this episode in our Survivor group chat, Jack sent a message saying, there are so many animal shots in this one. And I got mentally ready, thinking, okay, we're going to cover 3 or 4 different symbols. And we barely got any this week. We only got the dead sea turtle, right? And that was one I had to force out of you.
Well, none of them were that interesting.
See, I tune most of those out in general because I just assume that you'll take the load on those. But for this week, they'll get my dishonorable mention.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hopefully there'll be more in the future that we can look forward to.
I've earned it. That's fine. I'll take it.
Yep, that's everything then. That's the premiere of Survivor Panama in the books. I'm feeling optimistic about this season. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not the craziest strategically, but I think these are some of the most compelling characters that we've covered on the podcast so far. So I think there's a lot to be excited about here.
This is going to be a fun one. Join us for the ride. We'll be doing this all summer. So keep up with us on social media. If this is your first time joining us, Clyde is big on TikTok. We just hit 25,000 followers over there. Pretty exciting stuff. And check us out there. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky and Threads. We don't really use them because, maybe I'll use them more in the off season, but probably not. But anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.